The prairie wind carried with it the dry scent of earth and wheat, whispering through the cracked boards of an old farmhouse where a man named Samuel sat on the porch, his face carved with sorrow and loneliness. Samuel had been a strong cowboy once, a man who commanded horses, drove cattle, and worked sunup to sundown without complaint. But the death of his wife had hollowed him out, leaving behind not a man of steel, but one of silence, weighed down with grief. For months his bed had been cold, his house empty, and his dinners reduced to bread and beans eaten alone, until neighbors started whispering that Samuel was wasting away. They spoke in hushed tones about his need for a woman to tend the home, to help him survive the winters. And though he did not seek it, life had a way of placing answers where one least expected them. The answer came in the form of a woman named Clara, a widow herself, large in figure with cheeks round and soft, and hands worn from toil. She had been mocked often by the town, called too fat for marriage, and when her father died, leaving her with nothing but a few chickens and an old barn to sleep in, the crueler folk of the settlement laughed that no man would take her. Samuel, however, was not a man of mockery. He saw her sweeping the church steps one Sunday, her dress faded but her posture proud, and though the town boys jeered behind her back, Samuel's eyes found something different: a strength, a heart unbent by ridicule, and a dignity that no insult could strip away. It was not long before Samuel asked her hand, though not in the way most imagined. He did not come with flowers, nor with promises of riches, but with simple truth. "Clara," he said, his voice steady as he stood in the dirt road while she carried a basket of eggs, "I have no riches, no fine house, and no comfort to offer but honesty. Yet I see you standing proud despite the cruelty thrown at you, and I need such a spirit in my home. If you'd have me, I'd ask you to marry me." The eggs nearly slipped from her basket, for no man had ever spoken so directly, so plainly, and though her heart raced, she looked into his eyes and saw no jest. She agreed, though whispers flew through the town like wildfire. "The widower must be desperate," they said. "Imagine marrying a woman like her. She doesn't even fit through the saloon's doorway." The cruel words were knives meant to wound, but Clara ignored them, standing at the altar with her head high and her hand in Samuel's, vowing herself to a man who saw worth where others did not. Yet marriage was not a fairy tale. When Samuel brought Clara home, she found the house neat but cold, the bed a lonely monument to years of grief. That night, instead of claiming the bed as her place, Clara took her shawl and lay down in the barn, saying softly, "I know what folks think, Samuel. They see me as too much, and I don't want to be a burden in your home. Let me stay here until I prove I'm worth a place inside." Samuel, rising at dawn, found her there among the hay, asleep beside the old mare, her body curled against the chill of morning, and his heart ached with both anger and tenderness. Kneeling, he shook her gently awake and said, "Clara, you'll never again sleep in a barn as long as I draw a breath. You're my wife, and that means the bed, the table, the very roof over my head is yours as much as mine. Don't you ever doubt that you deserve it." She blinked back tears, unused to such words, and though hesitant, she followed him inside, where he made a place for her at the table and poured her coffee as though it had always been so. From then on, Clara began to reshape the house, filling it with warmth where there had once been only silence. She mended the torn curtains, filled the pantry with bread she baked herself, and laughed often enough to make the walls seem less like prison, bars of grief, and more like a home. Neighbors watched in surprise as Samuel's farm began to thrive again, his cattle healthier, his fields greener, for Clara worked beside him, her strength unmatched, her hands steady. When drought struck and men lost crops, Samuel's fields still bore wheat, thanks to Clara's wisdom in conserving water and her tireless labor. Soon, whispers changed from mockery to curiosity, and curiosity to respect. Those who had called her too fat now saw her as a woman who had breathed life into a house of sorrow and given strength to a man who was fading away. But respect never comes easy. One evening at the saloon, two men who had long laughed at Samuel approached, smirking. "Tell us, widower," one said with a cruel grin, "how's life with the barn wife? Does the bed groan under her weight?" Laughter followed, but Samuel did not smile. He stood slowly, his chair scraping the wooden floor, and fixed them with a stare as sharp as a drawn gun. That woman you mock is worth more than both of you put together," he said in a voice that silenced the room. "She's worked harder than either of you ever will. And if you had half her courage, maybe you'd be men instead of cowards." The saloon went still, the laughter dying, and though Samuel returned home without throwing a punch, his words had struck deeper than any fist could. When Clara heard of it, she wept quietly, for no one had ever defended her before, not even her kin. And in Samuel she found not only a husband, but a shield against the world's cruelty. As the seasons turned, Clara's presence transformed the widower's farm into a beacon. Travelers found food and rest at their table. Orphans found a bed in their loft, and widows found a friend in Clara, who never again allowed anyone to feel as she once had discarded and mocked. The house rang with children's laughter. Neighbors came to share meals, and Samuel, once hollow with grief, now carried himself tall again, his eyes alive. People stopped whispering to fat and began to say too strong to break. And in the quiet of night, when Clara lay beside him, Samuel would whisper, "You saved me. Clara, the world may not have seen it, but you were the gift I never knew I needed." Their story spread beyond the town, a tale of a struggling widower and the woman the world said was unworthy, who proved not only worthy but essential, not only deserving of the bed but deserving of respect, of love, and of admiration. And so, when the prairie wind swept through the wheat fields, it carried not the whispers of cruelty, but the echo of their laughter, their strength, and the lesson that love does not measure waistlines or mock scars. It measures courage, heart, and the ability to see worth where others do not. Friends, if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that true value lies not in appearance, but in resilience, love, and kindness, then don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another tale of courage and love. Because stories like this are what keep hope alive in a world that often forgets the meaning of dignity and respect. Stay with us, share these stories, and let's keep spreading light together. The seasons rolled on, and the little farm that had once been a place of silence and grief became alive with the rhythms of work, laughter, and love. But with every blessing comes a new test, and Samuel and Clara soon found themselves facing challenges that would shake the very foundation of their marriage. One particularly harsh winter arrived earlier than expected, sweeping across the plains with a fury of ice and wind so strong that barns collapsed and cattle froze where they stood. Samuel worked day and night to keep the animals alive, his hands blistered and his body worn thin, while Clara, refusing to stay indoors, braved the storms to haul water, chop firewood, and cook hearty meals that kept the household alive. Yet, despite their tireless efforts, neighbors began to lose hope. Families abandoned their land, heading east in search of safety, and whispers once again started in town, this time not about Clara's size but about Samuel's decision to keep fighting for land that seemed cursed by nature itself. One evening, when the blizzard roared so loud the windows rattled, Clara found Samuel sitting by the hearth, his shoulders slumped. He spoke words she never expected from his lips. "Maybe they're right. Clara, maybe we should leave this place. I can't keep fighting storms and failing crops. I can't keep asking you to give so much." She knelt beside him, her warm hand taking his, her eyes steady. "Samuel," she said, "you didn't marry me because I was weak. You married me because I was strong, and I'll prove it to you. This land is ours, this home is ours, and we will not give it up. You gave me a bed when I was sleeping in a barn. You gave me a name when the world called me worthless. Now let me give you courage when your spirit falters." Her words rekindled the fire in him, and together they endured that winter, rationing food, sharing blankets, and never once letting despair drive them apart. When spring finally broke through, the thaw revealed not only survival but a chance for growth. Clara had ideas no man had considered: planting root vegetables that survived in harsher soil, using the fat from animals to make soap they could sell, and even brewing herbal remedies that townsfolk began to seek. Slowly, she became known not as the fat wife but as the wise woman of the plains, and people traveled miles for her advice. Samuel watched in quiet pride, knowing that while he had once saved her from a barn, she had now saved him from giving up on his land. But pride is a fragile thing, and there were still those who could not accept Clara's rise. A merchant from town, jealous that Clara's homemade goods were cutting into his business, began spreading cruel rumors that she used witchcraft, that her size was unnatural, that no decent man should rely on a woman's hand to keep his farm alive. These lies stirred old prejudices, and soon a group of townsfolk gathered one Sunday outside the church, whispering when Clara and Samuel walked past. A woman sneered loud enough for all to hear. "There goes the widower who married desperation, and the woman who tricks him with spells." Samuel's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Clara stopped him with a hand on his arm. She turned to the crowd, her voice clear and strong. "You call me too fat, too strange, too much. But let me tell you what too much looks like. Too much work hauling water when men gave up. Too much heart to feed orphans left behind in storms. Too much courage to stay when others ran. If that is too much, then may the Lord grant you even half of it." Silence fell, for truth carries more weight than mockery, and even the cruelest tongue could not find words to fight back. From that day, no one dared to call her less again. As years passed, the farm flourished beyond what Samuel had ever dreamed. Where weeds once grew, tall wheat now shimmered golden, and where sorrow once sat heavy, joy now lingered in the laughter of children. They had taken in orphans of neighbors, who had perished or fled, whom Clara raised as her own. She taught them to cook, to mend, to ride horses, and Samuel taught them to plow, to rope, to read the stars. Together they created not just a family but a legacy. The bed Clara had once hesitated to claim now became a place of warmth for her and Samuel, the hearth a place of gathering, and the barn a memory of a time she no longer feared. Yet, even in their happiness, Clara never forgot the sting of her early days, and so she dedicated herself to lifting others, women who had been mocked, men who had been broken, children who had been abandoned. She created a circle of strength around her home, proving that dignity was not a gift from society, but something one claimed for oneself. One summer, a wandering preacher stopped at their farm, drawn by stories of the remarkable woman who had turned ridicule into respect. He asked Samuel, "What made you choose her when the town said she was too much?" Samuel smiled, his eyes soft as he looked at Clara, who stood in the doorway with flour on her cheek and laughter in her eyes. "Because she wasn't too much," he said quietly. "She was exactly enough. Enough to heal a broken man, enough to turn despair into hope, and enough to show the world that love is measured not by size, but by strength of spirit." The preacher carried that story to other towns, and soon Clara and Samuel became legends of the prairie. Widower and a bride the world had mocked, who built a life not out of wealth or perfection, but out of courage, dignity, and unshakable love. And so, dear friends, as this story closes, let it not be just a tale of a struggling widower and the bride they said was too fat, but let it be a reminder that true love looks beyond what eyes can see and measures worth by the weight of the heart. Clara once slept in a barn because the world said she belonged there, but Samuel lifted her into a bed because he knew she deserved it and more. And together, they proved that every human soul, no matter how scorned or doubted, deserves respect, love, and a place of honor. If this story inspired you, if it stirred your heart to see strength where others see weakness, then I invite you to subscribe to this channel. By doing so, you'll never miss another tale of resilience, courage, and love, and you'll help us share stories that bring light into a world too quick to judge. Let's walk this journey together, friend, because somewhere out there, another Clara waits for her chance to be seen, and another Samuel needs to hear that love is enough.